and welcome everyone here. Please note this meeting is being live streamed and the consequences of that. We've already done a karakia for the council meeting just previously, so I won't repeat that. We have an apology from Councillor Henry, and I note that Councillor Joyce is online. So can I have a mover and seconder for Councillor Henry's absence? Councillor Sol, Deputy Mayor Scrimgeour, all in favour, please say aye. Against, carried. There's no consideration of late items. Doesn't have a declaration of interest on this one. No. Okay, there's no public excluded items. And there's no public forum I'm aware of. No presentation. So I'll move into item 10, the reports and the proposed draft Kaimai Reserve Management Plan on pages 7 to 235. Jason.
Kia ora koutou. Firstly, grateful that we can have this audience, this meeting, especially scheduled for the Kaimai RMP. Understanding there's your time is highly valuable. So I will take this report as read, but I would like to just go through a couple of the key areas, particularly because we are looking to have this RMP adopted for community consultation. That's pursuant to section 41(6) of the Reserves Act. So we must consult for 2 months and looking to go out 11th of March to the 11th of May. The draft plan was formed, as we discussed late last year, to the committee, formed through pre-engagement with tangata whenua, key stakeholders, internally with staff, and of course with yourselves, just to form that draft. And some of the key issues that we presented last year, we've added to that list. So I'll do my best to pull out some of those changes. Otherwise, more than happy to answer questions, and I'm sure you have questions. Establishment of a memorial wall in Amakoro, so that's on page 8 of your agenda. Proposal also to remove Kaiati Hall from the RMP due to being on Crown lands and not administered by council. Several new reserves being added, and that's, I guess, with the terminology, either newly created or they just weren't in the old RMP. And with that, we're proposing several new names through consultation. So we're requiring that public feedback. So where that came about was I approached Peter Rako to propose some names within the Rohi. They provided us a series of names in response. Most of those, there's key changes to that table. Huhuroa Park RMP initially talked about including the consultation on the RMP through this process. However, we are now proposing to undertake that review late this year, so 2025 into the 2026 year. Understood, maybe through scoping, did not understand the level of complexity and how much work, and appreciated the time that was required of Peter Rako and other stakeholders. So we want to do the process right and not get it tied up within the Kaimai RMP review process, to have it give its own light and really look to put that time forth. So rather than consulting on a Huhuroa Park RMP through this process, standalone process later this year.
So I'll just ask a question there, if that's right, Jason. Yep. So that's a resourcing issue for you or Peter Rako or both? Because I know we had given that clear guidance to do it together, because it makes sense from the public's perspective that, you know, whether it's a Huhuroa RMP or Kaimai RMP, I mean, these are sort of technical details that most people don't care or know about.
I'd say a little bit of resourcing, but it's more just the volume of work required for this, the Kaimai RMP, all the content required and all the consultation. I guess with the time frames, we just want to make sure that we don't miss anything for that, the Huhuroa review. And we basically weren't able to get in to have that conversation with the councillors. We didn't want to sneak it through a report and have no actual input of the committee prior to that. Don't know if that answers the question.
Well, from my perspective, I think it was more that there are literally dozens of reserves in this, and adding one more. I'm not quite sure I understand the complexities that you're suggesting. Rachel, did you want to?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, just through you. And I think Huharua Park is a different beast in so much that it was one that we worked in collaboration with Pirirako as our treaty partner in developing. So in that regard, taking that partnership approach to a review of Huharua is slightly different to the approach that we've taken to the breadth of the balance of the reserves in the Kaimai ward. And having our resourcing aligned with the timing of Pirirako, I think, is essential. So in that regard, what Jason has said regarding aligning our resourcing with the practicality of that for Pirirako makes sense if the committee is prepared to indulge us in that regard.
Thank you. Jason, Councillor Mowbridge.
I hope that we can improve our consultation in the future. Sir, we had all councillors, just about 3 of them. We had the community board, we had the staff.
Councillor Mowbridge, I think we'll come to consultation.
Sir, hardly any of the community. So Mokoroa don't know about this until it goes out. And so did you learn anything from the consultation that we did out of Mokoroa? It wasn't all that good, was it?
Hang on. I think Jason's taken us through this. Pre-engagement is all part of that, and the subsequent consultation. I think that will be better answered in just a moment when Jason gets to it. Does that make sense, Jason? Cool. Okay, if you can just hold your thought on that one, Councillor Murray Benjamin. We'll get to it. So I'll let Jason continue, and then we'll get to your question.
Thank you. I guess an important detail for this report is the potential future changes to the Kaimai RMP. So it is paragraph 18 on page 11. So there is that level of uncertainty. We've got the waters well done, the representation review, so potential ward boundary changes, which could bring in the likes of Pahoia Landing Reserve, the Pahoia Domain, and will push the Kaiati Falls Scenic Reserve into the Te Pukemakatu ward. So potential boundary changes there, and also understanding that there's several pieces of the land, particularly in Omokoro, that haven't yet been invested, but are pretty close to be invested. And those decisions, they'll be integrated into that final RMP. So we can look at making those editorial changes in the final product that is presented to you in June, and hopefully final adoption in July this year.
Jason, can I just clarify that the pieces of land of reserves that are currently in Katikati Waihi Beach Ward that are scheduled through the representation review to transfer to Kaimai Ward, they will be reviewed through this RMP no matter what the result of the representation review is. Is that correct?
Correct. Sorry, I don't have the page in front of me, but it's one of the last sections that we reference as other reserves.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So still seeking for feedback on those reserves. Otherwise, happy to take your questions.
Any other questions? Councillor Cox.
2 questions for you, please, Jason. And firstly, thanks for the little bus ride around the district and looking at all these reserves. It was great. I had a great day with little Ehai with me. It was fun. Babysitting as well. You were great at that too. So first question was investigating reclassification of known cultural sites to historic reserve status. That's my first question. What does that involve? And what does that what's the end product look like there? And my second question, I might as well just give it to you now, is 109 Clark Road, only one of the sections is sold, to my knowledge. There may be other things going on I don't know about. But I'd like to know what we paid for the property originally, what the cost is to do the reserve there, and how much we expect to obviously pay off debt, but how much we're expecting the whole net cost to be there.
So are you talking about 109 Clark Road? Yeah.
I'll answer the first question. So with regards to reserve classifications, there's about 5 different classifications under the Act. One of them, main one of our reserves is throughout the district is, your passive reserve is effectively recreation reserve. But the key thing is where there's a recreation reserve, but there's like a past site or some archaeological feature, etc., or cultural recognition there, then that gets given the same weighting for that area of the reserve as if it was historic reserve. So that's how that weighting comes through. If you, in some cases where it's like an outright pass, like Mangawhai Pa, yes, it's a historic reserve, because the Historic Places Act has restrictions on what you can and can't do there anyway. But in other places where a historic feature or cultural feature is part of a wider reserve, in this case might have 10 hectares, but you might have a hectare of it's quite specifically special. So that would be protected under recreation reserve status. But if you made the whole thing a historic reserve status, then it severely restricts what you can and can't do in the reserve. So that can, even like doing pathways and stuff like that through there, can create some issues. So you still need to get an archaeological authority, but it's just it just gives a little bit different weighting and gives more flexibility for council to better utilise its recreation assets where it needs to in that case. Yeah. The other question is probably something more akin for Kerry Little to answer outside of this forum, because it's information I don't have to hand. I understand that yes, one section has sold and there's interest in the others, but as for the financial situation and the net return, etc., that's different.
Yeah, it's one of the questions that will be asked.
Mr. Holyoake, maybe.
We paid about $2 million for the section. We've spent just over $500,000 on resource consent and development costs. That's about $2.5 million that it owes us. The valuations on the 4 lots, and I'm not sure which one sold and how much it went for, came in about $3.2 to $3.3 million.
The 3?
Yeah, for the 4.
4 sections, that's right, yeah. One sold for 650.
Okay.
Sorry, through you, Chair, just confirming we haven't sold a section, so that one has not come through, so it's fallen over that one.
Councillor Daly.
Jason, the Te Puna Quarry Reserve, just wondering, actually I just noticed you haven't changed the names in the ward specific plan yet. But are you going out for consultation on the new names or just with the existing names?
Yeah, so trying to make sure that the reader of the RMP understands which space we're actually talking about. So using that, the known name or the existing name, and then having the proposed name within there as well. So that'll be part of the consultation documents and part of the questionnaire that we put out. And with that, we'll have a little bit of a backstory as to where that name kind of originated and the purpose behind that.
I was just wondering on that park or reserve, have you had a discussion with the current volunteer group regarding future long-term governance and management approaches and developing a concept plan for it and what their response was?
Mr. Chairman, yes, there has been discussions, particularly after we had the unfortunate event of the fatality there 3.5 years ago. And they've agreed that as an ageing volunteer group, they need to look at their sustainability. So they are open to looking at various governance models leading forward. And that's something we've also committed to involve Peter Rako in that process as well. So, just to help, just regarding putting the names in here as well. So by having the names in your reserve management plan process means that this consultation you're doing about the change or new names is the consultation. You could have gone out and, as we have in the past, and said, investigate the name, and then we come back and go through a whole statutory process, tie up your time, everyone's time, bring it all into here as best we can. We'll deal all of that in one hit, so saves a lot of resource and democracy time there.
Councillor Mobenge.
Sir, I don't want to be critical of what you did at Amokara. I thought it was superb, but there's somehow, even you weren't there, Julie, so if it's a partnership, you expect the community to front up. And we've had meetings out there where you cannot stand because people are so crowded in. And it was just so unfortunate that the community that you wanted there didn't come. Whether it was the time of the day or quite what, I don't know. But we need to improve that. And if it is a partnership, then you expect everybody to be there. So, but I thought you did really well. And it was just a shame that we didn't respond. My question is, why do we always have to have native plantings in our reserve management plan? I saw that somewhere, and I think I've been in Dunedin and Christchurch, Beaumaris, beautiful trees that shade and give character to an area, and yet we seem to want to exclude them from our reserve management plan. Do you expect that the community has to have an opinion before it goes in? That I mean.
Chair, they're not totally excluded, but under the generic policy and the district-wide generic policy, it does encourage the use of, native indigenous plant species, which is what we have in this country as a natural feature, and we are trying to provide natural environments as well. But it doesn't exclude the likes of the walnuts in Walnut Grove, for example, or the big trees, Purukawa trees obviously provide shade. That's a native that could achieve that. But there are lots of other trees that achieve that outcome, and they don't have to be native. But we definitely, in all our embankments and stuff like that, the best way to manage it is a natural way by using our natural local species, as you see with the likes of Wakakatahi and nearly, I think it's how many hundreds of thousands of spending, but that's trying to achieve that Resource Management Act requirement of getting native generation back as well. Yeah.
Councillor Murray Benj, I'd encourage you to read it's policy 22 on page 37. Yeah, Indigenous New Zealand species will be generally used with reserve plantings where appropriate. These will be eco-sourced, and then it talks about where exotic species are planted. These will be selected due to an urban location, the desire for a deciduous species, historical association, etc. So it does allow exotic species, but given we are in New Zealand, it is most appropriate to plant New Zealand species most of the time.
I don't want to debate it with you, Sue, but really, when you drive down Memorial Avenue in Christchurch and you look at Hagley Park, yes, there's a great variety of trees, shade trees that children need when they're playing. And I just leave it with you at the moment.
Thank you, Councillor Murray Benj. Other questions? Councillor Daly.
Jason, just on the Coyote Falls Park, the fact that we're going to continue the consultation as part of this process, but are we going to extend the consultation for that particular reserve into the Makatu Te Puke ward, rather than just restricted to Kaimai ward residents, or does this go district-wide anyway?
The publication will go district-wide. That'll as part of our requirements under the Reserves Act as well through that public notice. And because we do have the district-wide information as part of the RMP, we just have to share it district-wide. So yes, it definitely will.
Councillor Granger.
Thank you. Jason, I have emailed you, as you know, with a whole bunch of issues and corrections. But the one I'm still confused with, and I don't understand the reply you gave me, is about landing reserves. So on the last words on page 9, we've elected to include landing reserves as part of this reserve management plan. But nowhere is there any definition or explanation of what a landing reserve is, or is a landing reserve just a name for something that's beside water?
Mr. Chairman, I can perhaps answer that. So landing reserves are actually subject to a different act. It's the Dry Harbour Reinvesting Endowment Act, the HEBLA we call it, and it relates to quite a few landing reserves around, and Pahoia is one of those as well. And there's a lot of them, they used to be used. We've got Lancaster, we've got Kotuku, where they used to bring the skiffs in and then bring the logs down, and that's where they landed the logs onto the boats to take them away. So they were known there. But they're often created by putting a stop bank around back in the 50s and 60s and creating that reserve status. and it has a slightly different status under the Act. So it's not a classification under the Reserves Act. It's not like recreation, local purpose or something like that. It is a landing reserve.
So can we have just a little bit more explanation?
Yes, yeah, we can flesh that out a little
Yeah,
bit before it goes out.
It's just dropped in there and sort of.
Yep.
Yeah, thank you.
Peter, I had a number of questions, perhaps more specific ones, but I'll start with a general one. So I note with the naming conventions, there's a series of Toreo names, Waihi, Orta, X, Y, Z. And I'm just wondering, with that, we generally make a distinction between, say, a reserve, which is under the Reserves Act, and a park like Waitakauke Recreation Park, which is not a reserve, it's just fee simple. Do we lose anything by having Waihi, Orta, whatever, that distinction, which is sometimes useful in the name? And is there perhaps a Māori term that can incorporate that in a slightly more definitive way?
I think if I'm hearing the question correct, do you need to use the word park or reserve on the end of it? Is that what?
Well, I understand that some of our pieces of land
Yep.
are called reserves because
Yep.
they're reserves under the Reserves Act, and some of them, which are fee simple, we tend to call parks because they're not a reserve.
Yeah.
And I'm just wondering, with the ones that, when we just say Waihi, Orta, whatever,
Yep.
that we're losing that distinction. And I'm just wondering, is there a suitable term in Toreo which accounts for that difference, or can be used to just delineate the two definitions?
Because the other one you put in there is a domain as well, under the Domains Act here. So it makes it a bit more confusing, but
Yeah.
there's a lot over the years. And I guess the underlying thing is what its legal status is as a vested as a reserve, a recreational reserve, and how we name it is slightly different. It doesn't have to have reserve or park something on it. Yeah, so I don't think we'd lose any value. The fact you'd be reading about this in a reserves management plan, it would be linking it to being a reserve, some kind. Yeah. So
I mean, I guess we'll hear back in consultation, but I
Yep.
see a question. Is this about this? Yeah, please.
Isn't an example Precious Family Reserve, which isn't a reserve, it's a stormwater. It was never gazetted as a reserve.
Correct.
But it's called a reserve.
Yep.
All right. Next question I had was on page 101 about the where is it now? Nelsdale. And Murray can probably answer this better than I can. It talks about progressively control environmental weeds of the reserve and monitor the Tainui tree. Now, I understood the Tainui tree was gone. Is that correct, Murray? Is it not gone?
Not all of it.
Not all of it. Okay, that's fine. All right, so that's actually a good thing then, but I just wondered if it had gone. Next question, and this is more of a curiosity. When the Jack Lloyd Reserve is named after the person who seems to be called John Ormsby, and I can see John becoming Jack, but the surname's different as well. It seems to have gone to an entirely different personality. So can you explain how that's come about?
Dug deep into our archives and had a look at correspondence between Ngāti Pongo and the whānau, and that's all I could read was the backstory. I don't have a lot more. Be interested to actually engage with that whānau as well to see where that name originated.
As long as the name's fine,
Yeah.
correct,
Yeah.
I'm sure. But
That was a text that I pulled from that conversation.
yeah.
So, Mr. Chairman, sorry, just to clarify, that as part of that community benefit, a lot that was done down there to enable council to even get the land. That was part of the naming was part of the transaction, and that's reflected in the price as well.
Okay. Moving to page 168 and to Puna Park. I'm just wondering, in the either reserve management approach or the reserve issues, do we want to mention the society's desire for a sealed road to the amphitheatre? I know they've requested that before, and I think there was some favour for that, but the cost might have been an issue at the time. Is that worth mentioning it or including in that? I mean, it will still be on for consultation, obviously, but just to get that in there on their behalf.
Yes, we can add. Just the button. Yes, we can add that. There'll be looking for that a resolution or a new resolution for us to make editorial changes, just to make sure that we don't miss those little details as well.
Yeah. Okay, right. Well, it's a little bit more than editorial detail. It's a substantive addition, but it's something that I know the society was keen on. And then next point I have, moving to page 187, which is the Puketoki Reserve. I was interested in this bit where it says dog control bylaw restricted to dogs on leashes, but a permit under section 122A of the Reserve Act is required from the council to take any dog into the reserve. Now, I know we have wander dog sessions there, so are dogs allowed there generally or not? Because it just seems a bit of an odd one that we kind of promote it as dog friendly as long as they're on leashes, but then they need a permit, which I'm pretty sure no one has. If it's helpful, we can come back, deal with it offline if you like, but yeah.
Yes, please.
Okay, we can do that, no trouble at all. I have a couple of typos which we can sort out. I intend to insert a recommendation, a fifth recommendation that allows the city to make editorial changes. So if you've got a whole bunch of typos or whatever, we can deal with those afterwards rather than go through one at a time. But that's me. But Tracy, I see you've got a question.
It's actually
or
Grant's
comment.
question, but he wants me to ask it. Puketoki Scenic Reserve, why don't we name it after the person who donated it, H.H. Sharplin? Was gifted. Puketoki Scenic Reserve. Or mention it at least.
Yeah, that's it. I guess a little bit before my time, but it was with the Crown and not with the council, so we just got control and managed, but we could talk to the local office about that. And of course, it had a history prior to that as well, yeah.
It's gifted, you sort of think there might be some acknowledgement like I answered. Precious, yeah. Cooney, wasn't it? It wasn't either, it was purchased, wasn't it?
The person at the time may not have wanted that to occur.
Okay, there's often some deeper understanding of some of these to come. Did I see a question over here? Councillor Ray.
I'm just looking at the potential future changes. Are you able to explain just a little bit further about what would be a potential change in relation to local waters done well coming? Because it states that those are potential changes to the RMP, but I just don't understand what those are. Like the representation review, I get that one, but what would be the change in if the local water's done well?
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, I'll attempt to answer that. I think what we're referring to there is that I think the jury is still out on whether stormwater is part of that. So when they had three waters, which was going to be stormwater, wastewater, and water, was all going to be transferred to a different entity. So council went through an exercise to look at, Gary Ellison and I did that with the property team about 3 years ago when it was first mentioned, about what does that mean to council's land holding. So if all your stormwater reserves that are in here and your precious reserve and stuff, we then had to go to a separate entity, what would that mean? Like where we have cycleways through there or where we have toilets on them and stuff like that, and signage and other recreation opportunities, what would that mean for having managing stormwater? But I think I haven't been appraised of that like you guys have, but I think that's the jury's still out on whether stormwater is. But if that does become a decision, then that will have an impact back onto this document.
Okay. Councillor Mowbenge.
one from Laura. So what impact would that have, Gary? Peter?
Well, what that would mean, when we looked at that, we went through a process. So we've got a big spreadsheet there of all these properties, and it's like talking about with the your stormwater, but also at the time we had wastewater. So where you have wastewater, we'd have to keep an easement in place, or if we had, or would you be better for that entity to manage the stormwater, because primarily stormwater, and we got a little cycleway trail, so then council would end up with a little easement with the cycleway trail because you protected it because it went to a separate entity, or do we keep the most of it and then give the entity an access way just for what they wanted to do and have like a little pond in the corner or something like that? There's a whole lot of scenarios on how that could look, but until we get that clear direction, we don't know how that will evolve.
Thank you. I just noticed Puna Station Road, we've got a little reserve there by the Wairau Bridge. And I was down to Puna Station Road, and where it's blocked, it looks an absolute tip. But the people are really cycling, they're enjoying it. But what's the purpose of the little reserve down by the Wairau Bridge? That's on page 212.
Right, so interesting little bit of history there. The irony is that it used to be road reserve, then it got stopped and made into a local purpose Esplanade Reserve because it joins a waterway. Then they wanted to put a road back into it. So its primary purpose became that as a road, but it's now a recreation, or like a local purpose reserve, which provides access to and along a waterway, but it has the cars going through there, obviously, with the people doing a loop around and coming up to get a left-hand turn onto the road network. And the irony is all the other kind of recreation facilities like the boat ramp and the rubbish bins and Wharepaku, the toilet, sitting on the road reserve, as does the freedom camping. Yeah, so that's all that is. It's just a historic thing going back probably to the late 90s where they changed it, wanted to stop the road. I think they were wanting to control vehicles going through there at the time by putting it into reserve, gave you different controls because it was, if it was a road reserve, you had the right to pass and repass, but as a reserve, you didn't. But effectively, it's used as a road.
So the question is, Peter, is it worth using this process to tidy that up? I turn that back to road reserve and the other stuff to local purpose reserve. I mean, is that something that's worth doing, or is it just more hassle than it's worth?
Statutorily, you could do that to make it right, but it will make very little difference to what occurs on the ground. So the functionality of it won't change at all.
Yeah. It's just in terms of, well, we're about to launch this process and it will all get wrapped up in the rest of it. So
yeah,
now's the time to do it. We're going to wait another 10 years to do it.
Yeah. Or potentially it may be that you wait till the TNL's in an operation and see what, if any, impact it has on traffic movement through there. It might be a better time to make that into the whole area into more of a passive recreation space as opposed to a little road thoroughfare at the moment.
Okay.
Well, sir, it appears that there's plenty of room for people to actually park and enjoy the river down there. It's working quite well. So whether it's zoned or it's not zoned, so it's all good. My second question is, though, how do we intend to make sure that people actually can see this management plan? Is it on our website? Is it easy to access? Because for the whole of the district, it's huge, Kaimai Ward, and they're not necessarily going to go to the public meetings that are being held. So how well will it be focused on our website? Because people complain to me that they have to search and it's really difficult to find out what's what. Just saying.
Yeah. Yeah, our website is one vehicle of reaching out to the community, but I'll let Jason explain how that's all going to work.
Yep. It's weird. I guess it's the same process, or a bit more bulked up process from what we usually do for the concept planning engagement, or what I've been doing for concept planning engagement. It'll be through that website. Through the website, we'll have the online questionnaire, links to the PDF maps, also links to a digital map. So people who are tech savvy that like zooming around online, a bit like a Google Maps thing, they can leave comments and submissions that way. There'll be paper copies out at all of our library and service centres as well. Opportunities for them to come in and provide feedback here directly through to our your place email address as well. And as you said, we do have those the consultation events that people may not come to. So we also have on-site banners one at Manamatanga Park, one that will go up on Makaroa, so a little bit more visibility as people just wander through the reserve. Posters, flyers, and public notice, so certainly public notice through Sun Life. So that part of that legal requirement is we have to put those into the news items. And there's a few other publications as well that we'll be using. I don't have the complete list, but we're reaching as far and wide as we can, different methods. And my name's at the bottom with my phone number as well, I believe, so people will call me.
Councillor Danny.
Yeah, sorry, Jason. Just in light of my previous question, Gerald Crap Reserve, I do notice that has got quite significant Maori history attached to it, being a former remnant fortification from the Wahuri Pa site located within the reserve. Was any consideration given to renaming Gerald Crap Reserve?
No.
No, not at this stage. Haven't had that conversation.
So that can come in through the consultation, and similarly, if there's any other suggestions for the other names, that's all part of the consultation.
So that'll be clear in the consultation that any reserve name is up for negotiation if someone thinks there could be a better name.
Well, I don't think we'd want to just say, hey, open Slatherwin, any reserve. I think that'll just get extremely messy. But if people feel passionate about it, they can make a submission. We do want to focus on what we want answers for, and renaming all our reserves is probably not on a bucket list.
My personal assumption, and it is only an assumption, the list of reserve names that we're proposing will probably trigger some questions from the public, and they might say, what about this reserve, that reserve, which we can have that conversation.
Alrighty, so I think that's the end of the questions. I'm not saying any more. So as I said, I'd like to suggest that we have, and Rosa's got the wording for me, I think on the fifth recommendation, which is that the chief executive officer be delegated authority to make such minor editorial changes as may be required prior to consultation. So I think that's a pretty standard addition we use. So with that, we have 5 recommendations. And so I'm looking for someone to move those, and noting that in number 4 we'll be approving rather than disapproving. So Councillor Granger has moved. I see Councillor Murray-Benge has seconded. Any speakers for and against? I think we've done a fair bit of covering this, but any speakers? No? Okay, in which case I'll put the motion. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Against? Carried. Thank you very much, gentlemen. And with that,